I arrived last Friday.
Last Friday? Read it! Read it! You're wild.
In 1974, a Western comedy about racism was made by a Jewish director, co-written by the most provocative black comedian alive, starring a lead actor who wasn't supposed to be in the film, from a script that studio executives were convinced nobody would find funny, and it became the highest-grossing film of the year. Warner Brothers spent the entire production trying to water it down. They failed. Mel Brooks had final cut written into his contract, and he used it. Every scene they told him to remove is in the film. Every joke they told him would destroy the movie's commercial prospects went in anyway. The campfire scene is in there. The N-word is in there. The ending that walks off the lot entirely and breaks the fourth wall in ways that were genuinely unprecedented is in there. The result was a film that made $119 million on a budget of $2.5 million, earned 3 Oscar nominations, and produced a cultural conversation about race in American cinema that neither the industry nor its critics were fully prepared for. 15 facts today, covering the casting disasters nobody talks about, the writer who shaped the film's entire racial politics and was then denied the role he'd written for himself, the lawsuit from an actual Hollywood legend, and the question the film still forces you to answer 50 years later. Let's count it down.
Honorary Chairman of the Welcoming Committee, it is my privilege to extend to you
15. The script began as a story called Tex-Ex. Before Mel Brooks was involved, before Warner Brothers was involved, before anyone knew what the film was going to be, a young writer named Andrew Bergman sat down and wrote a first draft called Tex-Ex, a Western parody whose protagonist was a black sheriff named after Malcolm X. Bergman was in his 20s. He was working as a comedy writer, not yet established enough to command attention, and he was pursuing something genuinely unusual, a comedic take on the Western genre that used its conventions specifically to expose the racial absurdity embedded in American frontier mythology. The Old West, as Hollywood had always depicted it, was a world of white heroes and white villains where black people existed, if at all, at the margins. Bergman wanted to put a black man at the center and watch the whole mythology collapse around him. He sent the draft to Mel Brooks. Brooks read it and immediately grasped what it could become with the right creative team working on it. He brought in additional writers, Norman Steinberg, Richard Pryor, and Alan Euger, and the process of expanding and sharpening the script began. The title went through several iterations before landing on Blazing Saddles, which studio executives reportedly found too strange and too suggestive, pushing for alternatives like Black Bart Rides Again or The Blunter Tex. Brooks refused every alternative. He was right to. Blazing Saddles is exactly the right title, simultaneously absurd and evocative, telling you almost nothing about the plot, while conveying everything about the tone.
He wore a shining star, his job to...
14. Richard Pryor co-wrote the film that was written for him, then wasn't allowed to star in it. This is the fact that carries the most weight in Blazing Saddles' production history, and it requires sitting with carefully because it is genuinely complicated. Richard Pryor was brought into the writing room as one of 5 credited co-writers. His contribution to the script was fundamental. The specific edge of the racial satire, the voice of the black characters, the places where the comedy cuts closest to real pain. The character of Sheriff Bart was written with Pryor specifically in mind to play him. Mel Brooks wanted Pryor in the lead. That was the plan. Warner Brothers said no. The studio's stated reason, as documented in Scott Saul's 2014 biography Becoming Richard Pryor, was that Pryor was uninsurable, a reference to his well-documented history of substance abuse that had recently produced a significant incident on another film set. The studio wouldn't finance the film with Pryor as the lead. What followed was one of those moments where the institutional response to an artist's personal difficulties has long-term creative consequences that nobody inside the institution fully processes. Pryor's writing stayed in the film. His fingerprints are on every scene. The character he wrote for himself was given to another actor. And Cleavon Little, who gave an extraordinary performance as Sheriff Bart, was the beneficiary of a situation that shouldn't have been necessary. Brooks said later that he was disappointed. Pryor, by all accounts, understood the business reality without accepting it as just. The film that would not have existed without his specific vision could not exist with him in the role he'd written. He received his co-writer credit. He received no starring credit. And every frame of Blazing Saddles contains both of those facts simultaneously. 13. Gene Wilder was cast because the original lead collapsed on set. The story of how Gene Wilder came to play the Waco Kid is one of the more striking production anecdotes of 1970s Hollywood, because it required one actor's crisis and another actor's immediate and complete trust. The role of Jim, the drunken former gunslinger who becomes Sheriff Bart's unlikely partner, was originally cast with actor Gig Young. Young had a long Hollywood career and the right kind of weathered presence for the role. He showed up on the first day of shooting. The scene called for him to hang upside down in a jail cell, drunk. Young was actually drunk. He hung upside down. He began vomiting immediately. Production stopped. The scene couldn't be filmed. Young was in alcohol withdrawal, a medical crisis, not simply a question of poor judgment. He was removed from the production. His condition was severe enough that he later sued Warner Brothers for breach of contract, though the details of that litigation have been covered sparsely in the public record. Mel Brooks called Gene Wilder. The two knew each other from The Producers in 1967. Brooks explained the situation. According to multiple accounts, Wilder didn't read the script and didn't ask extensive questions. He simply got on a plane. He was on set the following morning. That level of trust, showing up for a friend's film without even reading it, speaks to something specific about the relationship Brooks and Wilder had built. It also produced a performance that is one of the most casually brilliant in either man's career. Wilder plays exhaustion and wisdom in the same register, and the warmth between his character and Cleavon Little's feels genuine because it was. The chemistry between the leads was real, discovered in the first days of a shoot that had just lost its original lead.
Well, my name is Jim, but most people call me...
Well, hot. John Wayne was asked to play the Waco Kid, and his reason for declining is perfect. Before Gig Young was cast as Jim the Waco Kid, Mel Brooks reached further. He asked John Wayne. Wayne was, in 1973, one of the biggest names in American film history, the embodiment of the American Western hero for 4 decades, the archetype that Blazing Saddles was setting out to demolish. Casting him as the drunken, retired, entirely over-it sidekick would have been an act of spectacular cultural judo. Wayne reportedly loved the script, found it funny, enjoyed reading it, and then turned it down because he said it was too dirty, and he couldn't afford to be associated with that content given the audience he'd built over 40 years. He did say, by Brooks's account, that he couldn't wait to see it. There's something perfect in that response. The Western's most iconic figure reading a film that was specifically designed to expose everything the Western believed about itself as a beautiful lie, finding it genuinely funny, declining to participate for entirely pragmatic professional reasons, and being genuinely curious about the result. He wasn't offended. He just wasn't available for the demolition of his own mythology. 11. Warner Brothers spent the production trying to soften the film. Brooks ignored every note. The relationship between Mel Brooks and the Warner Brothers executives during the production and early screening of Blazing Saddles was a sustained negotiation in which one side had all the formal power and the other side had the only thing that actually mattered: final cut. Brooks had negotiated final cut into his contract. This was not a standard arrangement. Directors with that contractual position were rare, and the studios who granted it were typically dealing with filmmakers whose track record demanded it. Brooks had The Producers in 1967, a genuine cult success, behind him, but nothing that justified this level of creative control by conventional studio logic. The executives used every other tool available. They screened the film for test audiences and came back to Brooks reporting that the audiences hadn't laughed at key scenes. They pushed him to remove the campfire scene, the extended bean-eating sequence, with its extended flatulence, arguing it was beneath the film's dignity and would alienate viewers. They were uncomfortable with the repeated use of racial slurs. Even in the satirical context, Brooks was deploying them. They wanted scenes softened, punchlines reconsidered. The ending brought back within conventional cinematic parameters. Brooks listened. He agreed to everything, and then he changed nothing. He would later explain his logic simply. The film was designed for the audience he trusted, not the audience the studio feared. He had written it, in his own words, for 2 weirdos in the balcony, for radicals, film nuts, guys who draw on the washroom wall. He believed that audience would find exactly what he'd put on screen. The studio believed that audience wasn't large enough to matter. The studio was wrong. If the real story behind a film that changed American comedy is the kind of thing you're looking for, subscribe. We cover the history that most people never dig into, every week. 10. Hedy Lamarr sued the production over a character's name. Among the more surreal footnotes in Blazing Saddles' production history is a lawsuit from a genuine Hollywood legend who, by Mel Brooks' account, simply did not get the joke. Harvey Korman's villain in the film is named Hedy Lamarr. It is pronounced and spelled differently from the name of the real actress, Hedy Lamarr, the legendary star of Hollywood's golden era. The satire was built into the distinction. The character's name was close enough to the real person's to be recognizable as a gag, but different enough to provide legal distance. Hedy Lamarr did not appreciate the distinction. She filed a lawsuit against Warner Brothers seeking $100,000 in damages, alleging that the character's name infringed upon her right to privacy. Brooks said publicly that he was flattered, genuinely, that she had noticed and had cared enough to respond. He chose not to contest the case, and the studio settled out of court for a small sum and an apology for almost using her name. The lawsuit was then worked directly into the film itself, in a piece of fourth-wall meta-comedy that Blazing Saddles could uniquely execute. In a scene involving Brooks's own character, Governor Le Pétomane, the governor tells Hedy Lamarr, "This is 1874. You'll be able to sue her." The lawsuit became a punchline inside the movie it was ostensibly trying to stop. Brooks said Lamarr never got the joke. He was probably right, but she inadvertently helped make the film more interesting in the process.
There might be legal precedent. Of course. Land snatching.
9. Cleavon Little was not warned about one of the film's biggest moments. There is a moment in Blazing Saddles, somewhere around the 45-minute mark, where Sheriff Bart delivers a line to the assembled townspeople of Rock Ridge that stops the room cold. Not because it isn't funny, because it's so precisely calibrated in its comic deployment of a racial epithet that the line requires an absolutely genuine reaction from the character on the receiving end. Cleavon Little was not told the line was coming. Brooks had made a deliberate decision. If Little knew what was about to be said, the reaction would be performed. If he didn't know, the reaction would be real. The shock, the pause, the specific expression that crosses Little's face in that moment, that is Cleavon Little actually processing an unexpected word in real time and finding the professional comedian's response to it before the camera moved on. It worked, in the most obvious sense. The moment plays, but it also raised a question about what Mel Brooks was asking of his lead actor. Whether the directorial choice to withhold information from a black performer so that his reaction to hearing a racial slur would be genuine was the right way to achieve that result. Brooks has never, to public knowledge, addressed that specific question directly. Little's performance throughout the film is full of this quality of real-time responsiveness. He was quick enough and skilled enough to absorb the unexpected and convert it into performance in the moment. That ability is a gift, and Blazing Saddles benefits enormously from it.
Town! Oh, Lordy Lord, he's desperate. Do what he say. Do what...
8. Madeline Kahn was asked to show her legs at her audition. This is a story that, depending on your reading of it, lands somewhere between charming anecdote and uncomfortable production detail, and Madeline Kahn's response to the situation is the most important part. Kahn was auditioning for the role of Lily von Stoop, the overtly Marlene Dietrich-inspired saloon singer and femme fatale who exists partly as satire and partly as pure comic performance. The character is a parody of German theatrical sexuality, the husky accent, the half-lidded delivery, the songs dripping with innuendo. The specific physical inspiration was Dietrich's performance in the 1939 Western Destry Rides Again, where the actress famously deployed her legs as a significant dramatic asset. Mel Brooks asked Kahn, during her audition, to lift her skirt so he could see her legs. Kahn hesitated visibly. Brooks, reportedly sensing her discomfort, offered reassurance. He explained that he was a happily married man and that the request was specifically about finding the right physical presence for the Dietrich parody, not personal curiosity. Kahn lifted her skirt, said, "No touching," and got the part. Her Oscar-nominated performance as Lily von Stoop is one of the finest comic turns in the film. Physically precise, tonally perfect, operating simultaneously as parody and genuine character work. The audition story is a reminder that for actresses of that era, navigating the specific discomforts of the casting process was a professional necessity that was rarely discussed as such.
Bitch.
Sheriff murdered, church meeting bombed, reign of terror must cease.
7. Alfred Hitchcock saw the film and called Mel Brooks personally. Mel Brooks spent the production of Blazing Saddles being told in various ways that the film wasn't going to work. The studio didn't believe in it. Early test audiences were reportedly confused rather than amused. The executives who screened rough cuts came back with anxiety rather than enthusiasm. Then Alfred Hitchcock called. Hitchcock had seen the film. The specific circumstances by which this occurred are not well documented, but the outcome is. He got in touch with Brooks to let him know that he had seen it and that he loved it. The two directors were, by any conventional measure, essentially from different cinematic universes. Hitchcock, the master of psychological suspense, Brooks, the anarchist of comedic excess. Their sensibilities shared almost nothing on the surface. What Hitchcock apparently responded to was the filmmaking beneath the comedy, the craft and control required to execute the kind of formal deconstruction Blazing Saddles was attempting. The film that looks like chaos is, on close examination, extremely precisely made. The fourth wall breaks are calibrated. The timing of individual gags is meticulous. The satire is targeted, not random. Brooks has spoken about the Hitchcock call as one of the most meaningful responses the film received. Coming at a moment when the studio's confidence was at its lowest, hearing from one of the medium's genuine masters that the work was real was the kind of validation that reframes everything that came before it. A master of horror, expressing admiration for a film about flatulence and racism. That is the specific range of Mel Brooks's achievement.
Ring out the church bells! Strike up the band!
6. Count Basie performed on a desert highway, and it was entirely intentional. One of the most visually absurdist moments in Blazing Saddles, and in a film full of them that is meaningful, is the scene where Sheriff Bart and the Waco Kid, riding across the desert, pass Count Basie and his full orchestra performing April in Paris in the middle of the open plain. There is no explanation, no acknowledgement from the characters. The orchestra is simply there. Basie is conducting with his characteristic cool, the music continues, and the two riders pass through and keep going. Mel Brooks had a specific philosophy about music in film, and Blazing Saddles was built around it. Most films use music as background, emotional underscoring designed to be noticed subliminally rather than consciously. Brooks wanted the music in certain scenes to be noticed, to be deliberately, irresistibly, comedically present, to exist in the foreground of the scene rather than beneath it. Bringing Count Basie and his actual band out to film in the desert was how he executed that philosophy in its most extreme form. The gag works on multiple levels simultaneously. It is absurd on its face. It is a deliberate genre violation. It is a reminder that you are watching a movie and the movie is aware of itself. And it is also, genuinely, a beautiful piece of big band jazz performed in an improbable location. Basie himself appears on screen, conducting with the complete, unruffled professionalism of a man performing his craft regardless of the context. He is arguably the most distinguished presence in the entire frame, which is itself part of the joke.
Township of Rockridge.
Gentlemen, let us not allow anger to rule the day.
5. The film was made for $2.5 million and made 45 times that back. The budget of Blazing Saddles was $2,600,000, a modest figure even by Warner Brothers standards for lower budget comedies. The film grossed $119 million worldwide, approximately 45 times its production cost. In 1974, it was the highest grossing film released in the United States, beating everything else, including prestige drama, action films, and every other comedy in the market. This carries a specific irony given how hard the studio had worked to reduce the film's ambition. Every scene the executives pushed to soften was a scene audiences found hilarious. The campfire sequence they thought would alienate viewers became one of the most quoted scenes in the film's history. The racial language they wanted toned down was the engine of the satire, The ending they considered chaotic was the most formally discussed element of the whole production. The studio had tried to make the film less dangerous. The audience showed up specifically for the danger. At $2.5 million invested and $119 million returned, Blazing Saddles is one of the most financially efficient studio comedies ever produced. Every dollar of that return came from scenes the studio didn't want in it. 4. The film earned 3 Oscar nominations and won none of them. Blazing Saddles was the highest-grossing film of 1974. It was recognized by the American Film Institute as one of the 100 funniest films in American cinema history. It earned 3 Academy Award nominations: Best Supporting Actress for Madeline Kahn, Best Film Editing, and Best Original Song for Blazing Saddles. It won 0. This is not a neutral fact. Mel Brooks said explicitly, years later, that he believed the film was too dangerous for the Academy to reward. The comedy establishment of 1974 still operated with significant deference to the idea that comedy was a lesser form than drama, that it was entertainment rather than art, that it didn't require the same level of seriousness of purpose that earned recognition. Blazing Saddles was asking questions about race in American history that serious dramas were not asking with the same directness. It was doing it through a mode, broad comedy, flatulence gags, fourth wall breaks, that the Academy couldn't easily accommodate within its existing frameworks for recognition. The film was too vulgar for prestige and too serious for dismissal, and that specific middle position made it difficult to honor without acknowledging what it was actually saying. Brooks had been passed over before. The producers in 1967 had lost the Best Original Screenplay Oscar despite winning the Writers Guild Award. He was developing a pattern: make films that were both funnier and more politically pointed than the industry was comfortable with, and watch the industry find reasons to honor films it felt safer about. The Academy moved slowly. The audience, as usual, was ahead of it.
Please, Mr. Taggart, I'd say you've had enough.
3. The film ends by walking off its own set into another movie. The ending of Blazing Saddles is one of the most formally radical conclusions in mainstream American cinema of the 1970s, and it is worth describing in full for anyone whose memory of it has faded. The film's climactic battle, the assembled citizens of Rock Ridge versus Hedley Lamar's assembled gang of outlaws, breaks through the physical set. Literally. The characters crash through the walls of the western town and end up on the adjacent soundstage where another film is being shot. The fight continues across that production, eventually spilling out of the studio entirely onto the Warner Brothers lot and then into Hollywood itself. Brooks's character, Governor Lepetomanehan, flags down a limousine. Inside is Mel Brooks. The character and the director share a moment of acknowledgement. The film then transitions into a screening of itself, with Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder watching their own film before riding off on horses. This was not improvised or accidental. The ending was written into the script from the beginning, as a deliberate statement about the relationship between fiction and reality, genre and its deconstruction. Brooks understood that a film that had spent 90 minutes systematically dismantling the mythology of the American Western needed an ending that dismantled the very idea of cinematic fiction itself. Audiences in 1974 were genuinely uncertain how to respond to it. Nothing in their experience of going to the cinema had quite prepared them for a film that ended by consuming its own frame. The confusion was the point. When you break the myth completely enough, even the screen doesn't hold.
You say that.
What?
Meeting is adjourned.
It is?
No, you say that, Governor.
2. The film could not be made today. And that fact is the measure of its importance. This is the entry where honesty is required. Mel Brooks has said clearly and publicly, most recently in interviews marking the film's 50th anniversary, that Blazing Saddles could not be made today. Not because he has softened his own convictions, not because he regrets anything in the film, but because the cultural environment in which a studio would greenlight it, a cast would perform it, and a marketing apparatus would release it has changed in ways that make this specific kind of work essentially impossible within commercial Hollywood. The question this raises, and it is genuinely worth arguing about, is what that change represents. Is it progress? The recognition that language has real power, that representations of racial violence and humiliation have real consequences for the people who bear the weight of those histories, and that entertainment has a responsibility to that reality? Or is it a failure? The loss of a specific kind of satirical courage that was willing to use discomfort as an instrument to make audiences laugh at things they shouldn't find funny precisely in order to expose the mechanism of that discomfort? Brooks's answer has always been that the film was never trying to celebrate racism. It was trying to hold racism up to a light bright enough to make it look as absurd as it is. The comedy was not the racism itself. The comedy was the exposure of the racism, delivered at a register that made the exposure impossible to look away from. Whether that answer fully resolves the tension the film creates is something every viewer has to decide for themselves. The fact that the tension still exists, that the film still generates genuine disagreement 50 years after its release, is the most reliable indicator that it was doing something real.
Hey, maybe you should eat something first.
No, thanks.
1. What Blazing Saddles was actually about. And here is the thing that carries all the way through, beneath every gag and every studio fight, and every piece of casting chaos. Blazing Saddles is a film about what the mythology of America conceals. The Western genre, as it existed in American cinema from the 1930s through the 1960s, was a sustained national story about heroism, individual courage, the taming of wilderness, and the construction of civilization from nothing. It was also, when examined directly, a mythology built on the erasure of the people who were already in that wilderness, and the deliberate exclusion of the Black Americans whose labor was essential to the country those heroes were supposedly building. Mel Brooks and Richard Pryor and Andrew Bergman and the rest of the writing team understood this. What they built was a film that put a black man in the center of that mythology and watched the mythology fail, watched the town of Rock Ridge prove within minutes of Sheriff Bart's arrival that it could not accommodate what it claimed to stand for. The people who sing about how Rock Ridge stands for decency and law and community turn immediately to the language of hatred when a black sheriff shows up to protect them. That's not an incidental joke. That's the film's argument, stated plainly and then demonstrated for 90 minutes with considerable velocity and craft. The campfire scene is in there because bodily functions are the ultimate democratizer. They don't recognize dignity or status. The fourth wall ending is in there because the mythology being dismantled isn't just the Western genre. It's the idea that cinema itself is innocent, that entertainment doesn't carry ideology. The racial language is in there because sanitizing it would have been exactly the kind of polite fiction the film was built to destroy. Mel Brooks wrote it for Two Weirdos in the Balcony. 46 million Americans saw it in 1974, and the conversation it started is still happening. That's what happens when a film tells the truth in the only voice loud enough for everybody to hear it. 15 facts. 1 film. And a question I want to put directly to you. Do you think Mel Brooks is right that Blazing Saddles could not be made today? And if he is, do you think that's a problem or a sign of progress? Drop your answer in the comments. There is no safe response, and I genuinely want to know where you stand. Subscribe for more of this. We'll be here next week.